The hidden face of danger. Most people think danger looks like a raised fist, a violent outburst, or a clear threat. We imagine it in the form of loud anger, sharp words, or cold cruelty. But what if the most dangerous people in your life never raise their voice? What if they smile, speak gently, offer support, and yet behind it all, their true intent is to break you down, piece by piece, without ever leaving a mark? In today's modern world, manipulation doesn't wear a villain's cloak. It wears a tailored suit. It sits beside you at meetings. It sends you polite messages. It remembers your birthday. And it is precisely because of this, because of how subtle, quiet, and socially acceptable it appears, that it often escapes our awareness. But the wound it leaves? It's psychological, long-lasting, invisible to others, yet deeply scarring inside. This isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition. In psychology, manipulation doesn't always come with bad intentions. Sometimes it's driven by insecurity, envy, the need for control. But the result is the same: someone slowly takes away your confidence, your clarity, and your connection to your own instincts. They don't need to physically hurt you to damage you. All they need is access to your mind and enough trust to twist it. In this deep psychology journey, we'll explore the 6 early signs of social sabotage, not from the perspective of surface behavior, but from the deep psychological roots that give them life. You'll learn how to detect them, not through paranoia, but through awareness. Not by judging others, but by sharpening your perception. Because in a world where evil rarely looks evil, the ability to see clearly may be the only protection you truly have. Watch till the end. You may realize that what you once thought was kindness was actually the first stage of control. Why evil hides behind politeness. In every age, evil has worn a different mask. In the Middle Ages, it wore the robe of religious piety. In the industrial era, it hid beneath the logic of economic necessity. But in today's hyper-connected, seemingly progressive society, the most dangerous kind of evil doesn't shout or threaten. It smiles. It compliments. It offers help. And in that politeness, in that perfect performance of social correctness, lies the exact reason it goes undetected. The most manipulative individuals are no longer those who scream or curse or show their cruelty in plain sight. They're the ones who hold the door for you, who ask how your weekend was, who make subtle jokes that belittle you all while keeping their reputation spotless. And if you try to explain to someone what they're doing, you'll sound paranoid. That's the brilliance of their disguise. Psychologically, we are wired to equate warmth with safety. We trust those who mirror our emotions, speak softly, or appear empathic even if their actions suggest otherwise. This phenomenon is deeply rooted in what Carl Jung called the persona, the social mask each of us wears to function in the world. But for some, that mask becomes the entire identity. They live behind it, weaponize it, and use it to infiltrate the minds of others undetected. Modern society, with its obsession over surface-level niceness, has created the perfect environment for this kind of manipulation. In workplaces, we're trained to suppress disagreement, to package criticism as feedback, to network rather than relate. In friendships, we fear confrontation, so we stay silent even when we feel someone's energy is toxic. The pressure to be positive becomes a shield behind which destructive intentions hide. And the tragedy? We often only realize it when the damage has already been done. But what makes these manipulative forces so hard to detect isn't just the mask they wear. It's our psychological resistance to imagining that someone close to us could have such intent. We tell ourselves, they didn't mean it like that, or maybe I'm overreacting. This self-doubt is not a flaw. It's a defense mechanism, one designed to protect our worldview from collapse. Because if someone we trusted is actually trying to harm us, what does that say about our judgment? About our ability to stay safe? This is where deep psychology becomes crucial. Only by understanding the unconscious drivers of behavior envy, shame, insecurity, power can we begin to recognize the subtle signals of manipulation. It's not about becoming paranoid. It's about reclaiming clarity. Because in a world where appearances are curated and motives are hidden, the real danger is no longer what people say. It's what they don't say. So ask yourself, who in your life always seems kind, yet somehow leaves you feeling smaller, confused, or drained? Who praises you, only to shift tone when you're no longer useful? Who listens, but only to later use your words against you? These aren't harmless quirks. They might be the early whispers of a silent war you didn't know you were part of. In the next part, we'll explore how psychological manipulation thrives through one of the most dangerous emotional traps, the subtle art of making you doubt your own reality, the gaslighting paradox. It always starts small. A comment that makes you pause. A look that makes you question your memory. A conversation that leaves you unsure of what just happened. Over time, you begin to second-guess yourself, your instincts, even your sense of reality. And that's exactly the point. This is not confusion. This is design. You're not becoming forgetful. You're being gaslit. Gaslighting is one of the most dangerous psychological manipulations because it attacks your core, your perception. Once your perception is compromised, everything else collapses. It's like hacking the operating system of your mind. And unlike open conflict, it hides behind a mask of care. The gaslighter doesn't yell. They calmly clarify. They don't insult. They correct your version of the story. And when you protest, they smile and say, "You're too sensitive," or worse, "I'm just trying to help." This tactic thrives in modern environments because of one brutal truth. Society teaches us to trust others before we trust ourselves. From childhood, we're taught to defer to authority, to respect others' opinions, to seek validation. So when someone begins to question our reality, we instinctively assume they must be right and we must be wrong. From a psychological lens, gaslighting is often used by those who fear losing control. By keeping you confused, they remain powerful. And the more emotionally invested you are in the relationship, the job, the friendship, the more vulnerable you become. Because you're not just trying to understand what's happening, you're trying to protect the bond. You want to believe this person cares, that they didn't mean it, that maybe it's you, but it's not you. It's the design. Gaslighting often follows a pattern. First, denial of your lived experience. Then, rationalization. You misunderstood. I was tired. You're imagining things. Finally, reversal. Now, suddenly, you're the one being difficult, emotional, unstable. And in that final twist, your emotional response becomes the evidence used against you. It's psychological warfare, but wrapped in silk. The damage is subtle but profound. People who experience prolonged gaslighting often report brain fog, anxiety, and a chronic inability to trust their own decisions. They stop expressing themselves. They shrink, not because they've changed, but because someone has slowly made them believe their inner voice is dangerous. And here's the paradox. The better the gaslighter is at pretending to care, the longer it takes for the victim to see it. That's what makes it so hard to leave. So hard to even name. Because it doesn't look like abuse. It looks like concern, but concern that always leaves you weaker. So if you find yourself constantly apologizing, even when you're not sure why, if your memories are routinely challenged, and you feel the need to record conversations just to stay sane, it's not because you're broken. It's because someone has trained you to doubt the one thing you should trust above all, your own mind. In the next part, we'll look at another subtle but telling sign, the quiet art of humiliation disguised as praise, and why envy never arrives looking like hate. When praise becomes poison, not all insults sound like insults. In fact, some of the most damaging ones are wrapped in compliments. "You're so smart for someone who didn't finish college." "I'm surprised you pulled that off, but good for you." "I wish I could relax all day like you." These aren't praises. They're backhanded reminders of where you supposedly fall short. And they are not accidental. This is the silent language of envy, a force more destructive than hatred, because it doesn't always declare itself. It hides in admiration. It speaks through subtle comparison. And most dangerously, it seeks to diminish without confrontation. The person who envies you won't shout. They'll smirk. They'll highlight your flaws in front of others with a chuckle. They'll call it a joke, but your body won't laugh. From a psychological standpoint, envy is rarely acknowledged even by the person who feels it. It's too shameful, too socially unacceptable. So instead, the envious mind rationalizes. I'm just being honest. They need to be humbled. It's not a big deal. But the deeper drive is not truth, it's control. Because when someone can't match your growth, your peace, or your light, they'll do the next best thing, try to dim it. And in modern society, this behavior is often excused. We call it teasing, banter, or humor. But humor, when used this way, becomes a mask for hostility. It's the perfect weapon, socially acceptable, hard to confront, and easily dismissed. If you call it out, you're too sensitive. If you stay silent, it continues. Either way, you lose. But here's where deep psychology offers a lens to decode the behavior. People who routinely offer poison praise often reveal three core traits. They deflect attention from their own insecurity. They seek social dominance through subtle hierarchy, and they operate in environments where appearances matter more than authenticity. You'll find them at office lunches, in group chats, even in families, always positioning themselves as harmless, yet always walking the edge of belittlement. So how do you know when praise is sincere and when it's toxic? Watch your energy, not their words. Do you feel seen or dissected? Empowered or silently judged? Uplifted or slowly undermined? Because real praise builds. It encourages, it celebrates without comparison. But poison praise, it always comes with a hook. A tension in your gut. A feeling that you've just been lowered by someone pretending to lift you up. And here's the catch. The more polite the poison, the harder it is to expose. That's why so many people endure years of micro-humiliation without ever speaking up. But over time, the weight of those subtle wounds adds up. They shape how you see yourself, how you trust others, how safe you feel in your own success. So next time someone compliments you, but your stomach tightens, trust that signal. It might not be rudeness you just felt. It might be envy dressed as admiration. In the next part, we'll explore a behavior that's even more disarming when someone rushes intimacy, pretends to care deeply, and yet disappears the moment you're no longer useful. Fake warmth, real danger. Some people walk into your life like a summer breeze, warm, caring, endlessly curious about you. They remember the little things. They laugh at your jokes. They offer to help even before you ask. And in the beginning, it feels beautiful. It feels real. But real relationships take time. And anything that feels too close, too fast, deserves a second look. Because sometimes, what feels like warmth is just a strategy. Psychologists call this love bombing or rapid intimacy building. It's when someone floods you with attention and emotional closeness, not out of genuine connection, but out of a subconscious or sometimes calculated desire to gain control. In friendships, it looks like sudden obsession. In the workplace, it shows up as unsolicited support or excessive flattery. And in relationships, it mimics romance, loyalty, even devotion. But there's a catch. The moment you're no longer useful to their emotional agenda, they vanish. Or worse, they turn cold. This pattern plays out not because the manipulator feels real love or interest, but because they want quick access. Access to your trust, your vulnerability, your secrets. And once they have it, they don't build something with it. They store it for leverage, for status, or for the illusion of closeness. At its root, this behavior often stems from an unstable sense of self. The person rushing intimacy is not truly connecting with you. They're trying to fill something missing within themselves. And in doing so, they overattach, idealize, and project. But no one can live up to that illusion. So the fall is inevitable. And when it comes, you're left wondering, was any of it real? This is where the danger lies. Because unlike clear acts of betrayal or cruelty, this manipulation feels like connection. It fools the nervous system. It mimics safety. And that's why so many victims of this tactic blame themselves when it ends. Maybe I said too much? Maybe I was too intense. But the truth is, the performance was never about you. It was about control cloaked in care. So how can you tell the difference between true connection and false intimacy? Time, boundaries, and inconsistency. Real relationships unfold slowly. They respect space. They can withstand silence. But manipulative ones demand access, overshare too quickly, and become emotionally volatile when their pace isn't matched. If someone's warmth feels overwhelming, if their interest in you feels performative rather than personal, it might not be love. It might be strategy. And when you finally set a boundary, when you ask for space, or simply stop feeding the intensity, watch how they react. The ones who disappear or retaliate never came for you. They came for what you could give them. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into the subtle power play, where manipulators isolate you, not by attacking you directly, but by quietly turning others against you. Divide and conquer. Imagine this. You begin to notice subtle shifts in your relationships. A close friend grows distant. A colleague no longer looks you in the eye. People who once supported you now hesitate. And the strange thing is, nothing obvious has happened. There was no fight, no betrayal, just silence. A slow unraveling. But what if that unraveling wasn't an accident? What if someone orchestrated it not with lies, but with half-truths and implications? This is the strategy of triangulation, a classic psychological tactic used to divide alliances, isolate individuals, and gain power without ever being direct. Instead of confronting you, the manipulator speaks to others about you. They sow doubt. They play the victim. They just share their concerns out of context. And they do it with subtlety so fine, you won't even realize what's happening until the distance has grown too wide to cross. In social psychology, this behavior reflects a deep need for control through fragmentation. The manipulator knows that when you are supported, you are strong. So their goal is to erode your support system quietly. They won't say, "Don't trust her." They'll say, "She's been acting strange lately. I hope she's okay." They won't accuse you. They'll express concern. But that concern is loaded. It frames the narrative, and it changes how others see you without you ever being in the room to defend yourself. The danger here isn't just in the deception. It's in the emotional erosion it creates. Because when you begin to feel disconnected from those you once trusted, you start to question yourself. Did I do something wrong? Why is everyone pulling away? And in that confusion, the manipulator steps in as the only stable presence, the only one who understands you, who remains neutral. But they're not neutral. They've just eliminated the alternatives. This tactic often appears in group settings, families, work environments, social circles where power is distributed and influence can shift quickly. And the person using it often plays both sides. They appear empathetic, understanding, even helpful, but in reality, they're constructing an emotional chessboard where you're slowly being cornered. So how do you spot this manipulation? Watch for patterns, not moments. If you sense a growing disconnection from others without a clear cause, investigate. Ask direct questions. Clarify misunderstandings early. And most importantly, trust your instincts. If someone is always in the middle, always the one who hears things, yet never takes a side, they're not a peacemaker. They're positioning themselves at the center of control. And when you identify this behavior, you don't need to fight it head on. The best defense is to reestablish direct, honest relationships with those being used against you. Because triangulation only works in the shadows, it can't survive the light of clarity and communication. In the next part, we'll examine one of the most manipulative tools in the emotional arsenal, guilt, and how it's used not to awaken your conscience, but to hijack your boundaries. Guilt as a weapon. Guilt, when healthy, keeps us human. It reminds us of our values, corrects our mistakes, pulls us back when we drift too far from who we want to be. But guilt can also be distorted, not as a moral compass, but as a leash. In the hands of a manipulator, guilt becomes a weapon. Not to make you better, but to make you obedient. It begins subtly. You say no, and suddenly they act wounded. You set a boundary and they remind you of everything they've done for you. You choose your needs and they imply you're selfish. And just like that, the internal war begins. Not between right and wrong, but between your freedom and your sense of obligation. Because now, it's not about what you did. It's about how they felt and how you're supposed to fix it. Psychologically, this is known as guilt tripping. It's a manipulation strategy that leverages your empathy against you. The manipulator doesn't control you with threats. They control you with disappointment, with silence, with phrases like, "I guess I just expected more from you," or "It's fine, I'm used to being let down." And you, being the kind, thoughtful person, you begin to bend. You apologize. You overcompensate. You say yes when everything inside you is screaming no. But here's the dark truth. The more you give in to guilt that isn't yours, the more control they gain. Because now they found the button, the emotional pressure point. And every time they press it, they don't just get what they want, they reshape who you are. You become smaller, quieter, more agreeable. Not out of love, but out of fear, the fear of being seen as bad, ungrateful, or uncaring. This dynamic often emerges in relationships where one person plays the martyr. They suffer publicly. They make sacrifices visible. They narrate their generosity in great detail, not for gratitude, but for leverage. And when the time comes, they cash in that emotional debt. After everything I've done for you becomes a currency, a cage. What's important to remember is that guilt, when authentic, leads to action and repair. But weaponized guilt leads to submission and silence. It doesn't invite understanding. It demands compliance. So, how do you break free? You begin by asking a hard question. Is this guilt coming from my conscience or from their expectation? You stop apologizing for having boundaries. You start observing who only values you when you say yes. And most of all, you reclaim the right to feel discomfort without immediately fixing it for others. Because their disappointment is not always your responsibility. Real relationships allow room for no. They respect autonomy. They understand that love isn't measured by sacrifice, but by honesty. In the next part, we'll confront the final red flag, the inability to take responsibility, and how chronic blame shifting reveals the mind of someone who cannot grow. The blame game. There's something quietly disturbing about a person who never says, "I was wrong." Not because they never make mistakes, but because every mistake somehow becomes yours. Or someone else's. Or the universe's. They deflect. They dodge. They explain, rationalize, minimize. And when cornered, they often retreat into victimhood. Because for them, admitting fault isn't just uncomfortable. It's unbearable. This is not about imperfection. We all make errors. But psychologically healthy people own them. They reflect, apologize, learn, and evolve. What we're confronting here is something deeper, the chronic avoidance of accountability, rooted in a fragile ego structure that cannot tolerate shame. In clinical psychology, this is often linked to narcissistic tendencies, where the individual's self-image is so brittle that acknowledging wrongdoing feels like psychological death. So they rewrite reality. They gaslight. They reinterpret events to suit their narrative. If you're upset, it's because you misunderstood. If you're hurt, you're overreacting. If something failed, well, the timing was off, or someone sabotaged it. Never them. Always something else. And slowly, you find yourself not only carrying the emotional burden of the situation, but also managing their inability to face it. Over time, this dynamic becomes corrosive. You begin to edit yourself. You soften your words. You take blame prematurely just to keep the peace. And in doing so, you internalize a lie that you are the problem, the overthinker, the difficult one. When in truth, you are simply in a relationship where the emotional maturity is one-sided. But here's the catch. People who can't take responsibility are often extremely charming. They tell great stories. They know how to gain sympathy. They speak with conviction. And that's what makes it hard to challenge them. Because they don't just deny fault, they make you question whether it even exists. The psychological cost of enduring this behavior is immense. You lose clarity. You start to second-guess your memory, your values, your sense of justice. And worst of all, you start to lower your standards. You begin to believe that expecting accountability is too much, that asking for growth is too critical. But it's not. It's the foundation of any honest connection. So how do you know if someone is trapped in the blame game? Look at their patterns, not their apologies. Do they ever take initiative to make things right? Or only when they're caught? Do they own their actions without defending them? Or do they spin the narrative to preserve their image? And most importantly, do they grow? Because no matter how good someone is at explaining themselves, if nothing ever changes, it's not insight. It's manipulation. In the next part, we'll turn inward, exploring how you can protect yourself without becoming hardened, and how to navigate a world of subtle danger without losing your softness. The art of silent defense. Some battles are not meant to be fought out loud. Some victories happen quietly in the space between reaction and restraint. When you realize someone has been manipulating you, harming you, or draining you, the natural instinct is to confront, to expose, to demand justice. But in many cases, that confrontation only feeds the dynamic. Because manipulators thrive on drama. They crave a stage. And when you react, you give them exactly that. True defense doesn't always look like a fight. Sometimes it looks like calm detachment. A simple sentence, "I see what you're doing." A shift in tone. A boundary set, not with fire, but with clarity. This is the art of silent defense, a psychological stance where you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. In deep psychology, this approach is often called gray rocking. It's the act of becoming emotionally unresponsive to manipulation, not to be cold, but to be protected. You don't feed the chaos. You don't argue over false accusations. You simply stop supplying the energy that the manipulator feeds on. And as the drama starves, so does their power. But this doesn't mean passivity. It means strategy. Silent defense is not about shutting down emotionally. It's about reclaiming the space inside you that was once occupied by confusion, guilt, or fear. It's about creating distance, not just physically, but mentally. You learn to hear their words without absorbing them, to witness their actions without personalizing them, to say no without explaining why. This isn't easy, especially if you're someone who values harmony, connection, or emotional honesty. There's a grief that comes with realizing some people never came to love you. They came to control you. And the hardest part? You might still love them. You might still care. But silent defense honors both truths: your compassion for others and your responsibility to yourself. It also requires self-trust. Because when you stop explaining, people will misunderstand you. When you walk away without a scene, they might call you cold. When you choose silence over proof, they might paint you as guilty. But none of that matters, because silent defense is not about changing their perception. It's about preserving your integrity. In practical terms, this means setting boundaries that don't need to be justified, taking space without guilt, ending conversations that go nowhere. It means remembering that your peace is not something you owe anyone an explanation for. And over time, something shifts. You begin to feel stronger not because you won the argument, but because you stopped needing to. Not because they changed, but because you did. You no longer live on emotional alert, waiting for the next jab, the next guilt trip, the next twist of the truth. You've learned how to stand without shouting, how to protect without attacking, how to reclaim your power quietly. In the next part, we'll look at the deeper psychological roots of why good people often attract manipulators and how unconscious patterns from childhood shape our vulnerability to harm. Why good people are targeted. It seems unfair, doesn't it? That the kindest people, the ones who listen deeply, care genuinely, forgive quickly, are the ones who often get hurt the most. They're the ones left confused, used, and wondering, how did I not see it coming? But this isn't a flaw, it's a pattern. And to break it, We have to go back, not to the moment you were manipulated, but to the first place you learned that love and pain can coexist. In deep psychology, many of our adult vulnerabilities can be traced to attachment patterns formed in childhood. If you were raised in an environment where affection was inconsistent, where love came with conditions, or where emotional neglect was masked as normal, then confusion became your baseline. You learned to scan for approval, to adapt, to stay quiet, to overfunction. And worst of all, you learned to tolerate discomfort because discomfort was familiar. So when you meet someone who sends mixed signals, who gives love then withdraws it, who flatters then criticizes, something inside you recognizes it. Not because it's good, but because it's known. This is the tragic brilliance of trauma repetition. We unconsciously recreate dynamics that feel like home even when home was harmful. But it's not just trauma. It's also temperament. People with high empathy, those who feel the emotions of others deeply, are often more susceptible to manipulation. Not because they're weak, but because they want to understand, to heal, to help. They see someone's wounded inner child behind the toxic behavior, and in trying to love that child, they forget to protect their own. Manipulators sense this. Consciously or not, they're drawn to those who give the benefit of the doubt, who won't walk away easily, who will self-reflect even when the problem isn't theirs. And once that dynamic is set, it becomes very hard to break because the good person keeps hoping, keeps believing, keeps trying to love their way through it. But here's the truth. Love is not rehabilitation. You cannot fix someone who refuses to see their own patterns. You cannot carry the weight of another's self-deception without losing your own clarity. And no amount of kindness can reach a heart that's committed to control. This realization hurts, because it forces you to stop seeing yourself as too naive and start seeing how deeply conditioned your goodness has been to overextend. It invites you to set a new standard, not where you stop caring, but where you care without losing yourself. And that's where true healing begins. When you no longer see your kindness as a liability, but as something sacred, something that deserves to be protected, not exploited. When you realize that your softness is not the problem. It's the reason they came close in the first place. Because light always attracts not just love, but shadow. In the final part, we'll bring everything together, exploring how to live with awareness, strength, and softness in a world where manipulation hides behind masks. Seeing through the mask. Not all monsters hide in shadows. Some stand in daylight, wear smiles, and speak in soft voices. Some sit across from you at dinner. Some tell you they love you. And that's the hardest part. Because the danger doesn't look like danger. It looks like someone you trusted. But here's the shift: awareness doesn't mean paranoia. It means presence. It means learning to look beyond words, beyond gestures, into patterns. It means listening not just to what people say, but to how your body responds. That unease, that tightness, that flicker of doubt you've been taught to ignore, its wisdom. Your intuition is not overreaction. It's the part of you that still remembers what truth feels like. In the modern world, manipulation is no longer loud. It's curated, polished, framed through emails, filtered through text messages, edited for appearances. But no matter how well it's hidden, truth leaves traces. And once you learn to see the signs, the gaslighting, the poisoned praise, the false warmth, the guilt traps, you can no longer unsee them. That clarity, painful as it may be, is a form of freedom. But freedom isn't just leaving what harms you. It's also choosing what protects you. People who respect your boundaries. Relationships that don't demand you shrink. Environments where you don't have to explain your worth. That's not luxury. That's survival. And you deserve it. You see, the ultimate goal is not to harden, but to discern. Not to shut down, but to see clearly. Manipulation loses its power not when you attack it, but when you stop participating in the illusion it offers. And once you no longer need their approval, their validation, their version of the story, they lose access to you. The final step is the quietest. You become grounded. Not bitter, not cynical, just rooted. You walk into rooms and feel who's safe without needing to prove anything. You listen with depth, but not with blind trust. You give kindness freely, but no longer as currency. You begin to live aligned with something rare and unshakable, your inner truth. And from that place, no manipulation, no performance, no subtle sabotage can truly reach you. Because the strongest defense isn't armor, it's self-knowledge. So the next time someone's smile feels a little too polished, their kindness a little too rehearsed, pause. Not to judge, but to choose. Because you are not here to be used. You are here to see clearly, to live fully, and to guard the peace you've worked so hard to find. And that is something no mask can ever touch.